All right, 4 o'clock on a Friday. Been a busy day. We got a little rumor du jour. That's why I wanted to bring on our next guest, our radio.com sports insider, Michael Lombardi, brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, now in 2 great tropical flavors. He's also the proprietor, if you will, of one of the best football pods out there, the GM Shuffle. We bring on our main man, Lombardi. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you guys?
Oh, super. You kidding me? We got a Stafford trade rumor. That's as good as it gets.
Which is so unrealistic. I mean, seriously, it is. I mean, the amount of cap debt that would occur in a trade makes the rumor really ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's just improbable that it could even happen. And like a lot of rumors, like the one my favorite this year was Dak. The Cowboys were going to sign Tom Brady and let Dak Prescott go. That was a brilliant one. That one could only be invented by somebody that has no clue about anything.
So let me ask you this, because I'm with you on this. The number's 24 mil that would just be dead on the cap. They got 45 total. But this rumor today by Mike Silver, and I know a couple weeks ago on GM Shuffle, you said you thought maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe Matthew would like to play somewhere else. So,
yeah, and then that's the permeation going through the league, is that it really the essence to trade Matthew Stafford, that alleged rumor, is really about maybe Matthew Stafford might want to go somewhere else and play. And I think that's kind of been the tone and the feel that I had heard through the National Football League, not from Matthew directly. This is just the overturns of the league. Does it make it true? I don't know. It certainly doesn't unless Matthew, and he's not going to admit it, but there have been that kind of sense that he would like out more than they want him out.
Well, and it's interesting, Mike, and there was a local report from WDIV here in Detroit, and they doubled down on their reporting that trade talks were going on, which is different than Matthew wants out. They doubled down and said talks had happened. Bob Quinn has spent the last 2 weeks essentially making Matthew breakfast in bed in the media, saying, oh, I would never. I mean, Mike, it's just a bizarre situation because it doesn't go away.
Yeah, and nobody wants to, look, people don't even acknowledge logic, right? So, there's $32 million of dead money that would occur. I mean, right now, it would cost them $10.7 million to cut him, to trade him. You're going to lose $10 million of your cap for what? Unless it's an Antonio Brown situation where you just say, you know what? We're getting away from it like the Steelers did when they got rid of Le'Veon Bell, which really had no cap occurrence, and then they got rid of Antonio Brown, which had huge. It had $18 million. Teams don't want to do that, especially for a guy who's a great person, who's a good, who's been a very good player for the team, and the team that needs to win next year. I mean, let's face it, they need to win. I mean, that's not a secret. I think even Matt Patricia knows that going into year 3, if he doesn't have some form of a winning record next year by the midway point, then it's not going to be a good situation for them coming forward.
So, Mike, here's the one thing then, and I mean, again, we rarely get into the whole conjecture deal, but, it's Combine Week, and, we'll have a good time with it. But something had to have happened if we're going to put credence into this. Now, I know, look, we follow it every week. You're on top of the NFL as good as anybody. There were a couple inflection points here where Stafford was very upset. And you do wonder, I mean, whether it was them taking him off the field when he didn't want to shut it down for the year, the 4th down play at Oakland where they took every good offensive player off the field, to him screaming, trust me, against Arizona. Or is it just them flirting with Tua? I mean, is it wrong for us to draw those kind of lines and go, could it be something like that?
I think there is merit. And again, this is conjecture that Stafford probably isn't exactly comfortable with what the scenarios are. And I'm sure there's a lot of players that are uncomfortable with the so-called Patriot way, especially when you don't have success. As I've said many times, when Matt walked in there and took over for Jim Caldwell, a very popular coach, Matt came in with the scorched earth. We're going to rebuild this thing. Yeah, that's great, right? But if he came in with the notion of, hey, fellas, I'm here to help us win Game 10, Game 11, Game 12. I've been down that road. I've won those games. I'm here to enhance the team, not tear down the team. That tone becomes a little different. And now he's in that tear down mode, and they've gone through 2 seasons of really, and if it wasn't for the Ford family, most NFL cities would not go through 2 bad years like this without making a change. That just wouldn't happen. But they did. But they held on because the Fords are a patient family. And I think that now he has to kind of deliver. And I think that frustration is really what Matthew Stafford feels.
Do you, and again, I defer to you on it. Does Stafford have the juice if he wanted to get out? If him and his agent, I believe Tom Condon's still his agent, does he have the juice to execute this and get out?
No, because look, no player can. I mean, look, we saw what Beckham did. They got tired of Beckham in New York. I mean, it wasn't he demanded a trade. They got tired of dealing with him, and so they traded him. I think that especially when you're the quarterback of the team, and I think it's important that if you're going to lead a team as the head coach, you've got to get your team members behind what you're trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to rubber stamp. I mean, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick have not always agreed on things, but Brady's been a very good soldier and a culture builder within that organization. That's got to be the key here for what they do. But I don't think they have enough juice because we're dealing with $10 million of dead cap money that you just wash away, especially in light of not having a cap for next year. Those are real problems. That money is taken right out of your cap. When you have to win this year, when you need everything in your power to win, and starting over with a rookie quarterback doesn't allow you to do that.
So, all right. So then there's two things that I guess that brings to mind for me. Let's start with the quarterback thing, because obviously there have been a ton of reports, and it's silly season, but that the Lions will actually take very seriously evaluating Tua and that they would consider taking him. The thought was you would just play Stafford, sit Tua, and next year Stafford's cap hit, if traded, goes way down. Did you ever believe, or do you believe now, that was a realistic possibility?
I think that has to be a realistic possibility. If I were the owner of the Detroit Lions, I would be telling Bob Quinn, I don't care about you thinking you need to win next year. Your main job is to protect the franchise. Your main job is not to win in 1 year. Your main job is to protect the franchise. That's the real job of a general manager. It isn't to put 10 wins on one season. It's to protect the future of the franchise. And if you think Tua is a generational talent that can add to this team in years 5, 6, and 7 down the road, then we should take him. And we should just groom him. Because the only time we're going to have to get a quarterback is when we lose like this. And if we feel like he's a generational player, then we'll take him. It may not make Matthew very happy. I'm really not interested in making Matthew happy. I'm interested in making the Detroit Lions the most successful franchise I can as a general manager. I think that's his job. He's got to do that. I don't think that's, to me, that's ridiculous. It's like, when we sit there and talk about, I wrote this column for The Athletic this week. One of the things that affects drafts are bias. Is when we have our internal bias, and all of us have bias every day of our life. People listening to this on the radio, you don't even realize the bias you have when making decisions. And one of the biases is when you think you have something and you really don't. The Portland Trailblazers thought that Clyde Drexler was just as good as Michael Jordan, and so they took Sam Bowie. How'd that work out for him? And so I think that you have to be able to take all the bias out of it. And when you're dealing with quarterbacks, especially if you think they're generational talent, you better take them.
Do you feel that way about Tua? I know how you feel about Burrow. Where are you at with Tua now that the medicals seem to be progressing?
I don't know where they are medical. This is where I'm a little bit hesitant to buy into it. Until I watch him work out, until I see him move, how do I really know what? Part of the medical is to do something with your ailment, right? Mm-hmm. You just don't get cleared and say you're medically okay, but then you can't move around, or you have no flexibility, or you can't throw the ball because you can't drive off it. It's one thing to be cleared to play. It's another thing to be able to play. Those are two different variables. Fans get caught up in that. I'll reserve my judgment on Tua until I see him work out. And then if he does that, and I think this Justin Herbert kid is a really good player as well. I think he's a really good player. I think he was kind of in an offense that didn't allow him. Jordan Love's another player, I think, that's going to show people how talented he is in this draft. This draft may have 4 or 5 quarterbacks in it that are going to be really good players.
All right, so the last thing, and it just kind of fits in with what we discussed about Patricia. And I know, look, Snacks quit on him. I mean, that wasn't a mutual thing. He didn't want to play here no more. You got a couple free agents I've been told that the team wants to keep. They're like, it doesn't matter what you offer us. We're out of here. And now, in a win-now mode, on top of all that, Mike, they're trading Darius Slay. They're getting rid of him. So right. My question to you is, how the hell is it win now when it's so toxic. Nobody wants to be here, and you're going to trade, objectively, your best defensive player.
It's challenging, right? This is what I've said from the beginning, is when you take over, when Bill took over Cleveland in 91, we'd won 3 games. We were a bad team, gave up over 400 yards, 28 touchdowns. So when he did a scorched earth in Cleveland, and it took us 3 years to really rebuild that franchise to where we went to won the last playoff game that they've ever won, we went through a lot, and Matt took over a team that won 9 games. And so there's going to be a lot. And what people don't understand is, and I think this gives the Patriot way a bad knock, it's hard to duplicate what they have in New England somewhere else, especially if players have never been around it before. And there causes a lot of resistance. It's one thing to say we're just going to do it the way the Patriots do it. It's another thing, you've got to modify what you're doing. Authentic leadership really matters. And you've got to be true to yourself. You've got to be true to what you believe in and take the principles of what you learned somewhere else. And this is where I think you see it. We saw it, Detroit Lions fans saw it with Mooch. He was successful in San Francisco because the culture was already in place there. To develop his own culture became problematic. It's the same thing here with Matt. Matt's got to be able to develop his own culture because the culture that Bill's built is only in Bill's building. We'll see that with New York with Joe Judge. Can he create that? It's going to be a challenge because not everybody is used to this kind of program.
Well, and that's the problem, too, with Patricia. Is you hear from more than enough people, he's one way away from it, and he's another way in the moment. And players see through that. Like, you can't talk about it. You got to be about it. And I think that is something he has struggled with since the moment he got here.
And I've said it before. Look, you can put the pencil behind your ear to simulate Belichick. It doesn't make you like Belichick. I could wear the same shirt that Mark Zuckerberg wears or Steve Jobs wears. That doesn't make me them. You've got to be authentic. I say this all the time. When Sinatra was wearing a leisure suit in the 70s, nobody knew who the hell he was. He's a tuxedo and a cufflink guy. They got that. When you try to be something you're not in leadership, you end up falling on deaf ears.
Mike, really, really appreciate it. We'll talk to you down the line.
Thank you.
All right. Michael Lombardi, radio.com. He's got his column. He's got the GM Shuffle. He's got it all.